the Luos and the Luhyas and the Kambas and a little Maasai, so that, as I've said rather harshly and bluntly, is not an election on issues. It is an ethnic census to determine whether a combination of Kikuyus and Kalenjins is larger than that of Luos, Luhyas, and Kambas, or vice versa. And if you look at how they have divided it, they have actually said it. If you look at our typical Kenyan politician, he says, we the Luos, it is our turn now. We the Luhyas, it is our turn now. So that when we talk about opposition, running an African country is not very easy. If you go to Angola, it is the Ovambo and the Ovimbundu. If you go to South Africa, the net effect is that the African politician is a very conflicted individual. Because on the one hand, he has culture and tradition defining how he behaves, but on the one hand, he also wants to behave as if he is a typical British or Dutch politician. So I say sometimes that when you look at an African politician, he suffers from split personality. And I say this in all seriousness. What the African politicians in many countries say on the platform is not what they believe in.
Thank you. I am Dr. Camillus Kasala of the Eastern Africa Statistical Training Center. There is no hygiene in African politics because of what I call the not always vicious circle. This circle begins with what is logical in African politics is not always practical. What is practical is not always right. What is right is not always ethical. What is ethical is not always desired. And what is desired takes us back to what is not always logical.
In other words, there are things that you say for the comfort and benefit of the so-called modern society and for Europe and America and Washington to hear, but there are things that you now say to Wazawa. And those things are different.
Now, what is the hygiene? Mwalimu Nyerere avoided what I call temptations of 5 Ps. And I would like the young people here to listen very, very carefully, because the world today is everywhere broadcasting these 5P temptations. Please, future African leaders, the young people, avoid the first P. Avoid being the victim of the first P. The first P is power. Avoid being the victim of the second P, property. Avoid being the victim of the third P, prestige. Avoid being the victim of the fourth P, popularity. And avoid being the victim of the last P, pomposity.
I'm submitting to us that if we are to produce hygiene in African politics, we must know what we want. A constitutional review gives us an opportunity to come up with homegrown solutions. Beyond the institution, the other thing that we must do is that we must have men and women of integrity. These men and women of integrity are not angels. They'll have made mistakes, but they'll have learned from those mistakes. These men and women should be subjected to certain ideals. There must be taboos in politics, the do's and the don'ts. We must have integrity in order to inject hygiene in African politics. I'm submitting to us the fourth thing, that the other thing that we must do is that we must de-ethnicize our politics. I did not go to school that I vote individuals because they come from my ethnic group. Tell me their agenda on health, their agenda on agriculture, so that if I vote for them, it should just be coincidental that we come from the same ethnic extraction. And I'm saying, it doesn't mean that you reject your being a Sukuma or a Mhaya or a Luo or a Kamba. Celebrate all those. But remember that in order to produce melodious music, you play the white of the piano and the black of the piano, and lo and behold, there is symphony, and there is harmony, and there is joy. I'm submitting to us that in order to introduce hygiene in our politics, the quality of the lives of the people must be improved. The gross national happiness index must improve, not the gross domestic product. I'm submitting to us that the misery index must go down. In other words, young Tanzanians and young Africans must have the opportunity to realize their potential. They must not go out to be humiliated. You young Africans, why are you celebrating Manchester United, not Yanga? You young Africans, why don't you have Sunday Manara and Gibson Sembuli recreated rather than Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi? You young Africans, why are you celebrating Julio Iglesias? Why are you not celebrating Farida Karoli? Why are you not remembering Baraka Munshehe Mwaruka, solo in his national? I'm submitting to us that in order to have political hygiene, we must also have self-esteem. In order to preserve the nation, sometimes memories must be selective. I remember after the civil war in Nigeria, the young Yakubu Gowon, receiving the Biafrans who had surrendered, said, "Brothers, I'm happy to see you." And the commentator says, at a critical point in Nigerian history, the victor did not gloat, and the vanquished were not humiliated. There is no future without forgiveness. There is no future without selective memories, but we must never forget. I'm submitting to us that the only thing that survives and will introduce hygiene in African politics is institutions. Because institutions will exist beyond us. So that I may remember at all times never to be a victim of power, never to be enticed by property, never to be victimized by prestige, never to be enticed by popularity, and never to be subdued by pomposity. So one of the things that we must realize, opposition and government, is that we are working and moving in the same direction. So what is opposition? Recognizing that African countries are fragile, I would have monthly meetings with all opposition leaders. They want to have an opportunity to contribute to the entire national enterprise. And they have good ideas, some of them. Ensure that these individuals are involved. Have quarterly meetings with all of them. Tell them, this is how we tell us how to run government. Do you have any problem with being appointed into my cabinet to serve so that these beautiful ideas, we mix mine with yours and we govern Tanzania? That would be my approach. And I think in that way, the opposition then becomes responsible. It becomes the loyal, responsible opposition. Otherwise, the opposition then exists to oppose everything and to propose nothing. And you can kill that by involvement. So that when we sit at the dinner table of civilization, it is the diversity that we should look forward to. You are not successful until your successor succeeds. You have been given an opportunity to elect. You elect a hyena to take care of goats, and then when the goats have been eaten, you wonder why. Let us have Africa Magufulified. God bless.